Okay, so in this series, I have the 1986 Boston Red Sox going up against the 1980 Houston Astros in a series which I thought going in would be kind of fun to play. Um, 1986 Red Sox, we all remember that was a team that beat the Angels in the LCS and then lost to the Mets in the World Series. Terrific lineup as you got Wade Boggs at the top of the lineup, who's a on base machine, singles, doubles, walks, everything. And then you've got him followed up by guys like Marty Barrett, Bill Buckner, Jim Rice, Dwight Evans, Don Baylor. So really a terrific lineup with also really solid starting pitching with Roger Clemens at the top of the rotation. And the 1980 Houston Astros, which is a team that I've played with a couple of times in the past, really a fun team to play with as they got really great starting pitching with the likes of J.R. Richard, Nolan Ryan, and a offense which is actually a lot better than people would think. Obviously, a lot of speed in that lineup, not that much power, but decent on base guys with some good speed. So, kind of thought this would be an interesting series going in, kind of fun to play. So, let's get it on with the 1986 Red Sox and 1980 Houston Astros. Now, what I always do right before the series is I just roll the 20-sided die, odd, even, to depend on who has the home field advantage. So I thought that that would actually play a really big role as to who would get the extra game at home, and it came up for the Houston Astros. So the Astros get the first two games in Houston. So in the first game, what a matchup here between two aces. We got Roger Clemens going up against J.R. Richards. So let's take a look at what happened in game number one. The Red Sox were able to jump on J.R. Richard for two runs in the top half of the first, thanks to a two RBI double by Jim Rice. The Astros were able to tie the game in the bottom half of the third inning. So that's how it stayed up until the top half of the eighth inning, where in that inning we had Wade Boggs lead off with a double. He was bunted over to third by Marty Barrett, and Bill Buckner was able to drive him home with a single. And that's how game one ended, with a 3-2 Boston Red Sox win. Obviously, in a game like this, even with the pitchers hitting, there was never a situation where I had to pinch hit for any of the pitchers until the actual last out of the game, where Richard Spot came up with first and third and two out, and I pinch hit Enos Cabell for J.R. Richard, and Roger Clemens is able to go all the way, 9 innings, 2 runs, and actually only 3 strikeouts in the game, which is kind of weird. But you see, terrific pitching matchup. Game goes pretty much to script, and the Red Sox were able to take it by a score of 3-2. Now, moving on to game number two now. The pitching matchup will be Bruce Hurst going for the Red Sox and Nolan Ryan going for the Houston Astros. And you could see that the Astros were able to really put a lot of heat on Bruce Hurst, as in only 4 innings of work, Bruce Hurst allows 7 hits and 3 walks, and the Houston Astros were able to have a 4-1 lead after 6 innings. And credit to Nolan Ryan, Dave Smith, and Joe Sambito, as they were able to hold the Red Sox to just 2 runs. So the Houston Astros were able to take the second game 4-2. So we go back to Boston with a 1-1 series tie. Now, moving on to game number three, as the series shifts over to Boston. So we have the DH in effect for the middle 3 games. That means the Red Sox insert Don Baylor at DH. And for the Astros in this game, I decided to put Enos Cabell at DH. So that's how we line up for the third game. And the starters will be Joe Niekro, who won 20 games that year for the Astros, and Dennis Oil Can Boyd. And you're going to see here that the Red Sox were able to really jump on Joe Niekro early and often. Now, Joe Negro, like I mentioned, won 20 games that year for the Houston Astros, and his card is, I would say, a pretty good card. It's not a great card, it's just a pretty good card. He has a string of hits in his four column, about 4 or 5 hits in a row. Most of them are singles, but he does have a string of hits, and it just seemed like I just kept rolling that four column. It was just I was just pounding away at that column, and you're going to see Joe Negro, 2 1/3 innings pitched, 7 runs allowed, 8 hits, 3 walks. Frank LaCourte came into the game. He throws gasoline on the fire, where in 2 thirds of an inning he allows 5 runs. You're going to see in that 9 run third inning, Don Baylor led the inning, or actually with one out and nobody on in that inning, he hits a solo home run, and then he finishes off the inning with a 2 out grand slam. So the Red Sox were just able to pound away at Joe Negro and Frank LaCourte in this game. They have a 13-2 lead after 3 innings, and that is pretty much how it ended up. You could see the Astros did not mount any kind of a real threat at all. Just got a few guys on base, and Dennis Cam Boyd was pretty much cruising along the whole game. So I just decided to just leave him out there for the full 9 innings. Why not? He's got an 11-run lead. So the Boston Red Sox have a 2-1 series lead after 3 games. Now, moving on to game number 4 now, our starters are going to be Vern Rule and Al Nipper. And once again, the Boston Red Sox were able to jump all over the Astro pitching here with a 4-run bottom half of the second inning, where the big hit was Spike Owen 2 RBI double, and Marty Barrett had a 2 RBI single. And then they were able to pour on 3 more runs in the bottom of the third, with Rich Gedman having a 2 RBI single. So once again, Astro starters get lit up. Vern Rule, 2 1/3 innings, 7 runs, 9 hits, almost a identical pitching line as to Joe Negro. So there I am sitting as we move to the top of the fourth of game number 2, and the Red Sox have a 7-3 lead. Now, even at this point of the game and in the series, I was kind of thinking to myself, I was like, well, looking at it from a 1980s Astros perspective, after splitting the first 2 games in Houston, I kind of said to myself, if I could get this series back to Houston, I know I'll be sitting in pretty good shape, because I know in game 5, even though Astros will be facing Roger Clemens, I got J.R. Richard waiting to pitch game number 5, and I got Nolan Ryan going in game number 6. So, not that I was throwing this game away for the 1980 Astros, but I was just saying, even if they lose this game, it's not the end of the world, because they are set up with J.R. Richard and Nolan Ryan for games 5 and 6, and then hopefully from there get it to a game number 7. Now, the Astros were able to mount a rally in the top half of the 5th inning. So you could see after a Cedeno single to make it first and second with one man out, I decided to go a little lefty righty here, because I really looked at this part of the game as being a kind of a part of the game where I kind of said to myself, from a Red Sox perspective, with a 7-3 lead, I did not want the Astros getting back into this game. So what I do is I take out Al Nipper and I bring in Joe Zambito to pitch to Jose Cruz. He strikes him out. And then I bring in Steve Crawford to pitch to Art Howe. Art Howe gets a single, but then he's able to retire Terry Poole. So after 4.5, the Red Sox are holding on to a 7-3 lead. So from a Red Sox perspective, feeling pretty good. Now, as we go to the top half of the 7th inning, my thinking here was, okay, let me see if I could get an inning out of Bob Stanley and then hand the game off to Calvin Schiraldi. Now, I didn't want to run Steve Crawford out there for a second full inning, because even though he pitched an inning and third of scoreless ball, it's one of those cards where you're kind of playing with fire if you leave him out there for a really long time. So I decided to bring in Bob Stanley, and Bob Stanley comes on, and you're going to see in this top half of the seventh inning, Rafael Landeskog leads off the inning with a single, and I got two circles next to that because that was a ground ball to shortstop, which I rolled the 20-sided die, and it came up a single. So that was a fielding chart single. That was followed by a walk to Joe Morgan and an RBI single by Cesar Cedeno, and that has one circle next to it. That was a ground ball to first base. Another fielding chart single gets the Astros a little bit closer and makes it a 7-4 game. Now, this is where, from this point on, the Red Sox defense really did them in even more because after singles by Landestoy and Cedeno, Jose Cruz reaches on a Bill Buckner error. Now, Bill Buckner that year in 1986, all right, and let's just all forget about what happened in Game 6 of the World Series. I think people have totally overblown all of that issue with the ball going through his legs or whatever. Look, Bill Buckner, and I know this because him playing against the Yankees for a couple of years. Bill Buckner was a good defensive first baseman. Okay, he may not have had a lot of range because he was a little bit older at that time and his legs were going, but I had a big problem with him being a 3 and an E17 at first base. It just felt like he was a better defensive first baseman than that. But anyways, you've got a Buckner error. So we have the bases loaded with one out in a 7-4 game. So that is where I pull Bob Stanley and bring in Calvin Schiraldi. He proceeds to give up an RBI single to Art Howe, and then that is followed up by a Spike Owen error. And then with two out, Alan Ashby gets the big 2 RBI double to give the Astros an 8-7 lead as we go to the bottom half of the seventh inning. And you're going to see that the Astros bullpen was really clutch in this game. Frank LaCourt with a nice bounce back effort as he goes 2 2/3 scoreless innings to get the win. He was followed up by Dave Smith, 2 1/3 scoreless innings, and Joe Sambito is able to close the game by striking out Tony Armas, who pinch hit for Bill Buckner, and then he retires Jim Rice with Wade Boggs sitting on second base. So the Astros with a big Game 4 victory as they're able to take it 8-7 to tie the series at 2 games apiece. And that sets up Game 5, where we have a rematch of the Game 1 starters, J.R. Richard and Roger Clemens. Now, this was a game where going into it, I had pretty much said to myself, with the DH in play and not having to worry about having a pinch hit for the pitcher and both aces being on full rest, I'd said, unless something crazy happens in this game, both pitchers are going to go all the way in this game. And you're going to see in this game that the Houston Astros were able to take a 1-0 lead in the top of the sixth with an Art Howe home run. Actually hit that home run off of Roger Clemens' card. So the Astros lead 1-0 going into the bottom half of the seventh inning. And with two out and nobody on, the Boston Red Sox were able to string together a rally. You had a double by Wade Boggs. Then you had Marty Barrett drive him home with what I really considered probably being the biggest hit of the series, where he drives in Wade Boggs with two outs to make the game 1-1 in the bottom of the seventh. And then Bill Buckner hits a double. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, I got Marty Barrett sitting on first base, who's a 1-14 running. And it was a clean double by Buckner. So I had the option of running Barrett home. So I decide in a situation like this, rather than, take my chances with Jim Rice and rolling J.R. Richards' card, which is basically everything is a automatic out when you're a right-handed batter facing J.R. Richard. I said to myself, I probably have better odds if I run Barrett home here. And sure enough, Barrett scores easily. So the Red Sox were able to take a 2-1 lead. And Roger Clemens was just money once again as he goes 9 innings, only allowing 1 run, 8 hits, and 2 walks on 8 strikeouts. So you could see both aces pitch very well. Although I would say J.R. Richard did dance in and out of trouble a lot in this game. You could see by his line 10 hits, 5 walks in 7 and 2/3 innings. However, the game does end 2-1. So the Red Sox have a 3-2 series lead as we go back to Houston. So as we go back to Houston, we have a rematch of the game two starters where we have Bruce Hurst going for the Boston Red Sox and Nolan Ryan going for the Houston Astros. And big story in this game was how much the Astros defense really let me down in this game. You're going to see by the line score here, the 1980 Astros commit 5 errors in the game. Um, I knew there was a risk of playing Enos Cabell at third base. He had a very high E rating at third base, which you really don't want. However, with Bruce Hurst pitching on the mound, I had to play him at third base as he's really um, probably their second best bat facing left-handed pitching. So you had errors by Enos Cabell, Rafael Landestoy made two. We had Cedeno make an error in center field. So that leads the door open to a 11-1 Red Sox rout in game number 6, and which was a game where, frankly, as I was playing it, it was a little bit of a disappointment because I was kind of hoping for a really good pitching matchup between Nolan Ryan and Bruce Hurst. And, I don't like having to sit through games like this where the game's a complete blowout because I don't think a game like this really does justice to a pitcher like Nolan Ryan or a really good team like the Houston Astros. However, when you are playing in Strat-O-Matic, you do go by defensive ratings and E ratings. And it was just one of those games where it just got out of hand, where with the Red Sox with a 3-1 lead going into the top half of the fifth inning, we had a leadoff single by Boggs, a Cabell error, and then you had a 2 RBI double by Jim Rice and an RBI double by Dwight Evans. And the 1986 Red Sox are able to cruise to an easy Game 6 win, and they're able to win the series 4 games to 2. Now, with this series going 6 games like it did, let me recap some stats that I was able to pull from this series. Um, I've did a video a while back on the series that I played with the 1978 Yankees and the 1979 Pirates, and so far that's the only series I played where it came up a clean sweep. But if you remember in that series, all 4 games were very close, as the Pirates were able to take all 4 of them against the 78 Yankees. Now in this series, you're going to see, yes, it did go 6 games, but you're going to see Red Sox domination here as they were able to outscore the Houston Astros 38-18. Frankly, when you get games like this where the Red Sox are up 5 or 6 runs, it's going to be very hard for the Astros to come back and string together big innings. And if you remember in game number 4, yes, the Astros were able to come back from a big deficit in that game to win that game. However, in that game, they were aided by really shoddy Red Sox defense in that inning where they were able to score the 5 runs and eventually take game number 4. So, really, when the 1980 Astros fall behind big, that's just not their game. The Astros game is strong starting pitching, get guys on base, steal base, build runs, and allow the pitchers to do their thing. So the 1986 Red Sox were really good at taking the 1980 Astros out of their game. And speaking of that, one player which I'm really going to highlight here in my recap is Rich Gedman, who, even though he didn't do that much at the plate during the series, I just wanted to highlight the fact that in this series, Rich Gedman threw 7 of 11 base stealers out in the series. How about that? He throws out 7 of 11 potential base stealers in the series. So a big series for Rich Gedman defensively. The big offensive star for the 1986 Red Sox was Wade Boggs, as he goes 12 for 26 in the series with 6 runs scored. He was basically always on base. Jim Rice had 7 RBIs, and let's not forget Don Baylor, who only started the 3 games in Boston with the DH playing, and in those 3 games, he went 5 for 11 with 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, and 4 runs scored. And the big pitching performance for the Red Sox in this series, just as it was throughout the 1986 season, was Roger Clemens. 2 games, 2 wins, both of them complete games as he went 18 innings, only allowing 3 earned runs. So there we have it. The 1986 Boston Red Sox defeat the 1980 Houston Astros 4 games to 2.